You're listening to The KYLO Show, the podcast where we talk about how to keep your love on no matter what and why whole healthy families are going to save the world. And it starts right now.
Well, welcome to The KYLO Show. We are back into our series. We've got Ben and Christian on here again. We are also going to sneak in a special guest, a special friend. This guy I met when I was 16 years old. He was 23, if you can just imagine that. He's also a guy that prayed at the altar with me to receive Jesus, So that was a key piece of my life. He gave me my first role in ministry as helping him in his youth group back in the day, back at Mountain Chapel. His wife and I have dedicated their firstborn son, Jason, to me by having him on my birthday. So that was a vital piece of how this works going forward. I just want to introduce to everybody my oldest best friend, Kris Vallotton, live from his office at Bethel Church there. Yeah.
Right in California.
Into California.
Yeah.
This guy is not only just been a father to everybody around him, but to one who's seriously taken on discipling nations and generations, building legacy, making an impact that goes on way past his years. Kris wrote a book called Uprising that is specifically talking about this issue of what do we do about the breakdown of fathers in our society. And so, Kris, welcome. Thanks so much for being here. What inspired the book, really?
Well, honestly, the truth is that we were in a prayer meeting it's like probably 5 years ago. And I had a vision and a powerful vision, actually, about stadiums filling with men. And if I'm not careful, I'll cry through this. So I don't want to do that. A stadium filling with men and who were broken stadiums, not a stadium, stadiums filling with men. And in the vision, I heard my son Jason's voice, and he was saying, "Men, welcome to manhood." And I suddenly realized that there was a movement that needed to start. We call it the Malachi movement because that day, the reason we call it the Malachi movement, because I had the vision when we were praying Malachi 4, 5, and 6, in the last days, I'll send Elijah the prophet. He'll restore the hearts of fathers to sons and daughters, and the hearts of sons and daughters to fathers. So that inspired this text message to Jay while I was in the middle of the vision. Jay, I see the Lord calling you to be a father to the nation and calling and teaching fathers, teaching men how to be fathers, actually teaching men how to be men, because the opening vision I saw is, he said, "Men, I'm going to welcome to manhood." And he was teaching men how to be men and then teaching men how to be fathers. So that fast forward a year later, out of that vision, Jay and a team of men started something called Braveco, which is basically the restoration of manhood, the Malachi mandate. And in the midst of all of that goes on in the juggling of like, okay, what role should I play in this? I just started writing notes and preaching messages around fatherlessness and fathering. And out of that, that book Uprising grew, the epic battle for the most fatherless generation in history. So, I obviously, like you, Dan, I'm an author. So it's like, okay, this is one way I can communicate the challenge that we're in the midst of, and some probable and possible answers to how do we see the Malachi mandate actually played out every day in culture, as opposed to being some religious idea that we sort of talk about, but nothing ever happens,
Right, totally. And we're not going to get into all the stats again, but we're we're thoroughly convinced that, the absence of a father is the breakdown of society,
Yeah.
and our enemy knows that. And for whatever reason, we have taken the bait, and we are in a rebuilding place in society. We are literally having to circle back and rebuild from the ruins. And I know that both you guys have been impacted by reading this book. And what kind of is what do you want to hear about?
I can go first. I have questions.
Okay.
Yeah. Danny said we have the young man. Like I read the book, I think in 10 days. So I read right through it. And I think the first thing that was really curious to me was you started discussing, it's probably towards the middle of the book, but this rite of passage, and I think you call them 7 stepping stones. And I like steps and I love formula. So like my ears kind of pin back and I go, oh, here's a process for how that happens. The curiosity for me actually comes in with a podcast that I heard you do with Jay a while back, a Brave Co podcaster. And you said something in there, and I'm wondering how the two connect. You said that you didn't become a man, I think, until you were 44 or 46 or something like that. So again, another thing that kind of like pinned my ears back. I go, what was it at that age that he knew that he was a man? And is that when he kind of figured out those 7 steps? Did he reverse engineer them? And now he's, like Danny said, he's, being a father to all those around him and father to nations. So can you talk a little bit more about the stepping stones and your own personal journey of how did you know that you became a man at 44 or 46, wherever the year was?
Yeah, I think 2 things. One, there's a tension in that story, in that, I have a rite of passage that I even share in a book about my grandfather and my family. But I think the challenge for me, I think that manhood, as it's connected to confidence, as it's connected to walking in a room and not feeling like I'm competing with everyone in the room, because I'm actually love who I am. I am no longer a pauper. I'm no longer an orphan. I don't enter every room thinking about how much, how I'm competing with these men who are in the room. That's what I meant by those comments. Like, I feel like my grandfather really helped me through the rite of passage in acknowledging my manhood. But from the standpoint of, I feel like I became a man, but I was still an orphan. And I feel like, the Lord teaching me how to love me and how to actually realize that I am loved, that my 2 stepfathers who did not like me. Let me say this, they didn't like themselves. So if you don't like yourself, like I know now, like, it's not personal. Like, they didn't like themselves, so how can you like anyone else? Yeah. But my stepfathers, value of me or lack of value for me was really, I just lived with that my whole life. And I realized at 44, when I had an encounter with the Lord, that it really lasted a year. I wrote the book, Supernatural Ways of Royalty, out of that encounter. But that's where I feel like I came out of that orphan spirit, or at least it began the journey out of the orphan spirit. And I really, really learned how to love myself. And I feel like my whole life, I never liked myself. And it wasn't like I wasn't consciously, I wasn't like those, some of our generation cutting themselves or, doing, self-destructing in that way. It was like very subtle. But when the Lord uncovered it, it became very obvious that I had spent my life with my stepfather's commentary on my own heart. And then I feel like I spent a year getting my heavenly Father's commentary on me. And once I got that, I don't want to say like, oh, all my problems went away. It's like, I think I talked to Danny last week this week actually, about feelings of inadequacy. So it's not like every problem went away, but the core of who I am was the foundation of my own identity in Christ was founded, and I feel like it's changed my life.
And you're just describing a process of maturity, like you get a revelation and then you mature into it, and it takes time. I don't know that it ever ends, but there is a momentum that builds almost like a snowball. So it starts out small, but eventually you start more easily wiping out insecurity.
Yes.
With referencing that love and recognizing and quickly making adjustments where that wasn't an option for 44 years.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'd say, like, we talked yesterday for a few minutes, and I was in a specific meeting with high level leaders, and I was, I was feeling, I was feeling overwhelmed with the sense of inadequacy, but I don't live there.
Right.
I don't live there. But if I get in the right circumstance and, certain powerful people respond a certain way, I can visit pauperhood and realize, like, yeah, I don't actually want to live here anymore. This is not a lot of fun.
We got to scrape those bumper stickers off our car, man.
Exactly, dude. Exactly. Yeah.
In listening to you, I was reminded of two things. One of that Sherry, whom we all love.
Yeah.
I remember when I was asking about through something, going, "Hey, I need to get healed of this," and I feel like I got healed of it. And she's going through this thing of just reminding me, going, "You got healing, but that thing that you did before, that's always going to be an option you can go pick up."
Totally.
And you just have a more revelation and better tools now to leave that there, but you could always end up back there. And that's been so helpful to me, because I thought that once I was healed, I should never make that mistake again.
Yeah.
The second thing I heard you say in response to my question about, at 44 becoming a man, I heard you really also just talking about becoming a son. So it feels like I heard you say that you becoming a son helped you become a man in the best way.
Yeah, I don't think you can be a father till you've been a son.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And here's the challenge on my side. Again, I don't want to keep talking about my past, because I don't live in my past, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But the way my stepfathers abused our entire family, actually, what it did is it caused me to not trust authority. And if you don't trust authority, you can't be a son.
Yeah.
And so, my issue was, I would always, I kind of represented myself like, I'm streetwise, man. You aren't going to trick me. Not going to trick me, because I actually don't freaking trust anybody.
I live in a trick. I'm already tricked.
I'm tricked, bro. So, I had to come to a place where I had to make a decision to trust. And I'll tell you, like, I see trust as in two ways. The first way is the way we kind of mostly talk about it. Like, you have to build trust. Like, if your wife or your husband steps out on you, the hardest thing isn't the reconciliation of forgiveness. The hardest thing is the reconciliation of trust. Because every time you're, 20 minutes late coming home from work, I'm like, hey, have you hooked up with that girl again? Right. And so there's that, wow, the destruction of trust is a big deal in relationships. And so there's that. There's the side of, I build trust through being consistent, being loyal, all those things that we can talk about. But, when I go to the doctor, like in Sherry's case, and, I have a serious illness that requires me to have an operation, I'm going to be operating on someone I probably never met. And I have to decide if I'm going to choose to trust them. And so I see that trust has, two kind of truths held in tension. One is, I build trust with you through your consistency and my consistency. The second one is, you could be the most trustworthy person in the world, and I could choose to not trust you. Or
not trust God.
I'm like, not trust God. So, I feel like for me, becoming a son began with, will I trust Bill Johnson? Not that I think he's a perfect man. He's never going to make a mistake. He doesn't do anything that is ever wrong. It's like, not that kind of trust, but Like, do I trust him with my life? Do I trust he has my best interest in mind? And will I submit to that? Like, will I actually say, so I think that submission is honor in action. So it's like, if I can't actually submit to anyone, I'm not sure I actually honor anyone really in real life, you know? And I mean, I could submit to a king I don't know. I mean, I can honor a king I don't know because I don't have to actually have to submit to them. But I mean, in everyday life, I got to have people I can submit to. Like, I can submit my life to. I want to explain the word honor so that I can say, I value what you carry. You have influence over me. I know that you have my best interest in mind, even though sometimes that you may fail at that, as I would fail with you. Yeah, those things are meaningful.
It's good.
Yeah. I'm sitting there thinking about what you just described with Christian, that 44 years old moment. And as a father of 2 girls and a son, you know, you talk a lot in here just about the impact even of fathers or fatherlessness on sons and daughters. And just that's one of the roles of a father, is actually to help guide this child towards confidence. You know, here's the guiding rails to help get you there. I think you probably answered it in some way already, but what would you tell that man who feels stuck just because that son piece that you're describing, that thing that he hasn't solved yet? You know, what are some of the keys? And it's in here, obviously, but I think, what are the conversations that you're having with men who are telling you the same thing you've worked through?
Well, I think that, you know, you kind of have to ask yourself, like, who's the problem?
Hmm.
And the challenge is that if you don't trust anyone, look in the mirror, bro. Right? And if you build a case against everyone, you actually should look in the mirror again. And I could say that, you know, I looked in a mirror that I didn't want to look in, and I didn't do that proactively. The Lord, through an encounter, and I realized the truth is I didn't trust anyone. I didn't trust anyone. And if you don't trust anyone, then you kind of like, wow, all factors lead back to you. Yeah. Like, you know, we kind of say in friendship, like, you know, not everyone's going to be your friend. No matter how nice you are, there's just going to be some people who don't like you. It's just life. But if no one likes you, you should look in the mirror.
It's good.
You know, so I think that taking responsibility, getting out of the victim mode, taking responsibility for your life, realizing that, hey, if you don't trust people, they tend to not trust you.
Yep.
If you reject everyone, they tend to reject you.
Mhm.
And, you know, and so I think that, you know, and then the big piece is, you know, if you don't love yourself, you know, let me say this. You teach people how to treat you by the way you treat yourself. If you treat yourself badly, if you don't love yourself, like if you self-reject, you kind of put off a smell that says, if you got to know me, you wouldn't like me. And then people who don't even know me don't like me because I actually teach them I'm not likable. Mm-hmm. And I think that for me, what happened for me at 44, as I was speaking to Christian, is that I came to love myself. I don't mean like arrogantly, like I'm a perfect person. I mean, oh, I actually love who I am. I actually enjoy my company. I'm very extroverted, but I couldn't even be by myself. Like I couldn't be by myself without an activity. Like, because when I stopped, I had to, whenever I stopped motion, I would suddenly, my idle was back to, like, I was idling, going nowhere, and thinking about all the things I didn't like about myself. And it's like, now I enjoy myself. Like I enjoy my own company. I do love people. I do love activity, but I love activity not because it keeps me from looking inside and seeing, you know, a closet full of skeletons. I love activity because I was born to do things, not because I have to do something so I don't feel bad about myself.
That's a great key. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think as I'm listening to you, I'm reminded of how much self-preservation we carry around with us, you know, and how easily it is triggered. And I think most men end up in a world where my self-preservation acts as an armor to being seen, as well as the bond with other men. You know, like there's a competition, there is a comparison, there's a contest I'm going to lose if I let other men see me. You know, because what they'll see is they'll see my weakness, they'll see my humanity, they'll see my frailties, they'll see my fears. So in self-preservation, I kind of puff my chest and I walk around and I wave my checkbook around and I unzip my pants and I do all kinds of things to show that I'm a man, and I have no vulnerabilities. And that's the fast track to having no friends. You know, that's the fast track to having no brothers. So what do you say to help a guy build a band of brothers?
Man, you know, you so described the world we so easily live in if we're not careful.
Yeah.
I call it peeing on the trees.
Yeah.
You know, like the dogs, we're marking our territory, we're peeing on the trees. And, you know, there are peeing on the trees meetings that, you know, I still go to, where men get together and they start peeing on the tree. And I'm like, and you're forced, you know, the temptation is to pee yourself. Like, you know,
go pee over the pee. Yeah, just go pee over the pee.
Exactly. I have to tell you this because this is for men. The other day I was out working in the yard, and I was, you know, we have a few acres, and it was a ways from the house, and I had waited too long to go to the bathroom. I had to pee so bad. And, you know, and we have a little wooded area, so there's not neighbors right on top of us. So I go out and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to pee right here. I'm all dirty. I'm not going to run back in the house. And so I start to pee on this tree, and my dog runs over, lifts his leg and pees on the tree.
Yeah, there we go.
That's the picture.
Yeah. We just bring out the best in each other. Yeah.
I just thought so much, like, these are meetings I go to all the time. You know, as such an illustration of what other, you know, the other dogs of doom around us do when, you know, we start, you know, that whole thing of not being transparent, I'm not going to be vulnerable. And I'm going to tell you my best stories. It's the Instagram, Facebook world. Like, here's my children. They're all happy. We're a happy people.
Yeah. Let me show you some more success. I got some more success. And over here, I got more success. Yeah.
I got the best story in the room.
We want to tell you a truly inspirational story. In 1997, starting with nothing but their faith, Steve and Kathy Horner sold everything and moved from Weaverville, California to Tijuana, embarking on a journey to create an orphanage. Since then, over 5,000 children have been rescued, loved, and restored through the mission's radical faith-based approach. And now, over 30 years later, Jimmy and Gina Horner, their children, are continuing to fight, believing that the church can create an orphanless world.
They are transforming nations one child at a time, and you can be a part of this incredible mission by joining the Missions Sponsor Program. For just $30 a month donation, this directly helps the children's needs and allowing the mission to create an extended community of care around these kids. By joining the sponsorship program, you'll receive a monthly newsletter, which I love to get, and updates on the kids that you're sponsoring. And these kids that you're sponsoring come from all over the world, Mexico, Romania, and Nicaragua. I mean, they're providing services like orphan care, after-school programs. They are doing all sorts of amazing things to help better these children.
We are believing with them that within our lifetime, an orphanless world is possible. And every contribution brings us closer to that reality. Your generosity can change lives and transform nations.
It's as easy as visiting this website, www.themission.org/sponsor. This is how you become a sponsor for a child today. Just remember, we are partnering with the mission and helping create whole, healthy people that create whole, healthy families.
Well, I want to say, first of all, you asked a question I didn't answer. I think vulnerability. I think what breaks that, peeing on the tree kind of spirit is when someone's sharing, they're in that mode. They're in there like, and we got the biggest ministry, we make the most money, and you go, man, I'm so proud of you. I've had a tough season, got a challenge with my finance. We had a downturn in our business this last couple of months. I'm pretty concerned about it. And that just breaks that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to, even though I'm worth 3 times more than you are, I'm going to tell you about the struggle I have right now. Or maybe I've accomplished more in the area you're talking about, but I'm not going to up you. I'm going to just get low and tell you about my real concerns. Like, I'm not going to make them up, but I have real concerns.
Yeah.
And, I have, in my case right now, I have, 2 of my kids are, 3 of my kids are thriving. 1 of my kids aren't. You talk about your kid, I talk about my kid. We talk about, and it's like, but I have a kid who's not thriving. And, I go to bed at night thinking about that kid.
Yeah.
And that's probably not the kid I bring to the pee party.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kid that I need to bring to that party so that we can guys, let's take off our armor and let's have a real conversation. Okay. Because all of us who have any responsibility, we typically aren't going to bed thinking about how amazing life is. We're typically going to bed thinking about those 2 things that we haven't been able to solve. And it feels like I need a miracle.
Yeah, and I would just throw out there that I know who my friends are because they know where I'm failing.
Mm-hmm.
They know my vulnerabilities. And I may, tell somebody that, just that I wouldn't maybe know them very well, but I would tell them that. But my friends protect that about me. My friends protect my weakness, and I need to tell them. I need to show another man the reality of my vulnerabilities, so that I can be a whole man. I'm not an Instagram man. I'm not a poser. I'm not just I just don't go to the pee parties.
Yeah. I just wrote the statement down this morning. We were in a meeting, kind of laughing and joking, and I said, when you look over the fence and the grass looks greener on the other side, make sure it isn't artificial turf.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of artificial turf over there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pretend, Photoshop lives. And the thing is, Danny, I think all of us men have lived that life. And it's lonely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
and
fake.
It's disconnected, and it's not fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not fun to be the person who has no problems. It's not fun to be the person who has to keep up this image that people like me because, I'm successful. And I'm like, well, I feel very successful, but I also have areas that I'm not succeeding in, and I need help in.
Yeah, if you're the only guy not with no failures, you're quickly in a room by yourself, because there are no other guys in the room with no failures.
Exactly.
And nobody wants to show theirs as soon as they realize this is not a safe place to be seen.
Yeah, and I think sometimes courage looks different when we're trying to build, because we're talking about, like, how do we build this with men,
Yeah.
And if you grow up in an unsafe home like you did, Danny, like I did, you kind of like, how to keep the armor up, like, how to not get your butt kicked.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have a whole, society of men who grew up like us, Danny, fatherless. And so, to get in a room and let your armor down, that ain't easy.
Yeah,
because I'm accustomed to getting my butt handed to me.
Yeah.
And so, as fathers, one of the most courageous things I think we do so that we can help people out of that orphanage is to be vulnerable.
Face that fear. Yep.
Yeah. Sometimes I have to tell my worst story. School ministry, especially first year, I'm pretty well known for telling my worst stories, because I want the students to get their armor off. Like, take off your armor and let's have a real relationship. And I think it's so important.
Yeah, it's walking in the light together, right?
I think it's one of the things that I've loved about being around your ministry, Kris, for years, is just that thing you're describing. So I've experienced that. Just talking about fathers and the responsibility you mentioned earlier. There's this phrase in the book I just want to point out real quick, because we say something similar, but we say it differently often, that fathers are meant to set the standard for love in the home. The way you said it here is that they're the keepers of the flame for love in the home. And I think the question there is, first, what does that mean to you? And then does that even flow into what we're talking about with vulnerability and other men? But the keepers of the flame, what does that mean to you? That phrase, it stood out to me.
I think that, well, first of all, I think that our kids need to grow up seeing us love God, but not in the way that and not in the traditional way that I think that sometimes our kids grow up in. And I think that, I guess I'm being confusing. I think sometimes what we think of keeping the flame, it's like, I'm the dad who says, you will go to church, you will read your Bible, you will. And I'm like, yeah, those things, I do believe in disciplines. I do believe in, I'm not letting my 5-year-old or 8-year-old decide if he wants to go to church or not. No, we're not doing that. But I don't think that's the inspiring part of my life. I think the inspiring part of my life is that my children actually catch me praying.
Yeah.
They actually, like on accident, they catch me praying. I'm up early. I'm in the front room where there's nobody, and I'm praying quietly. And my kid gets up to go to the restroom and looks down, and Dad is praying. And he gets a view of his father tapping in to the infinite power of God working in the family every day. I think that my relationship with God is benefiting my children. Like, they're happy their dad loves God because he's sensitive, he's approachable, he is humble, his discipline is fair and filled with kindness and humility. They experience a dad whose love for God benefits them and whose relationship with God benefits them. That's the most important. And sometimes when we think about keeping the flame alive, we're like making sure we're reading the Bible to them every day, make sure we're praying at the dinner table. I'm like, those things are good. As our kids get a little older, you have to be a little bit more creative about how you're going to, kind of knead the leaven into the loaf, so that it's a little bit more covert. It just depends on, who you're raising, but that's what I think.
That's great. Love that. I love this actually trajectory we're on with the podcast, because I heard we started with, how do we become a man? How did you know? It talks about start with being a son and a rite of passage. And then we start talking about putting a band of brothers around you to call you up and call you out, and then keeping the flame and our relationship with God. And which kind of gives me to this next thing of like, what your book is, a big part of your book's about is we have a job to do. We got this job to do. So like, here's how you become a man. Here's how you mature and grow as a man. And then now that you're a man, we need men. So we have a job that's needed. And for me, you could not have ended this book better. that last chapter where you talk about the Malachi mandate, like I was vibrating afterwards. I was ready to go take the hill, drew the sword, like, here we go. Like, okay. But could you talk a little bit about the Malachi mandate and start with how you connected Elijah to John the Baptist to us and what we're called to do right now?
Well, yeah, that's really a beautiful story. I was thinking about, what was the last chapter I wrote? Interesting. Let me put this together for people who are just like breaking in and listening to us right now. Like, what are you guys talking about? So Malachi prophesied that Elijah would come and he'd restore the hearts of fathers to sons and daughters and the hearts of sons and daughters to fathers. So you're like, well, okay, Elijah, why Elijah? Like, there were a lot of prophets in the Old Testament, and Elijah wasn't the kindest of them, So you start asking yourself that. Then the second reason why we're asking this question right now, and why the chapter is kind of highlights Elijah's life, is that Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up to this Mount Transfiguration, and Elijah and Moses appear with Christ. And so, and they have this, conversation. The Father speaks to Peter and James and John from heaven. So this is my beloved Son, whom I'm well pleased. So they have this crazy, like probably potentially the most profound open vision in the Bible, or at least among the top 2 or 3. And so the 3 disciples are walking down the mountain after they've had this crazy encounter, like open vision. 2 guys who, one, Moses was dead, Elijah went up in heaven, but basically 2 dead guys are alive talking to Jesus. And then the Father speaks audibly to them. And what is their conversation about when they come down from the mountain? Not about the audible voice, nothing about Moses, nothing about Jesus, becoming like white, glowing like light. They're like, hey, what's the deal with Elijah? The first question is like, hey, what's the deal with Elijah? And so Jesus says to them, well, he's coming. And they immediately reference Malachi, like, oh yeah, Malachi prophesied Elijah was coming. But then he goes, but he's already come. And they're like, he's coming, but he's already come. And Jesus is like, yeah, if you could accept it, John the Baptist is Elijah. But there'll be more Elijahs. And I'm like, okay, what is going on here? And so there's a couple of points that I saw through that. The first one is Elijah is he's this harsh kind of prophet. He calls down fire, but he shifts the course of Israeli history in one day. In one day, they go from worshiping idols to actually worshiping Father God in one day. Jezebel chases Elijah into a cave. Well, she intimidates him into a cave. He's in the cave. He makes this statement: I'm all alone. I'm the only one. Well, life's a bummer. Jezebel's ruling the world. Completely have forgotten that he actually shifted the course of Israeli history just like literally 12 hours earlier. And so we see the spirit of Jezebel, the effect of the spirit of Jezebel on Elijah. And then God tells Elijah, here's your answer. Okay, first of all, I got 7,000 other prophets besides you, so you're not alone. So your perspective under that Jezebel spirit is completely inaccurate. The second thing I want you to do is I want you to go anoint this king. I want you to anoint this king. Get back to what you're supposed to be doing, anointing kings, calling forth leadership. And the last thing I want you to do is I want you to go anoint Elisha in your place. He leaves the cave, he anoints Elisha, and from that day forward, the prophets who were that Elijah led, were called the company of the prophets. But when Elijah leaves the cave after this Jezebel episode and this encounter with the Heavenly Father, from that day forward, the prophets are no longer called the company of prophets. They're called the sons of the prophets. Not very long after, Elijah goes up in a whirlwind, and Elisha, who's his protege, says, my father, the horses and chariots of Israel. And we realize that God's answer to Elisha's fear of Jezebel is to enter the cave as a prophet and exit the cave as a father. And God goes, that's the spirit I'm putting on the next generation. I'm putting that spirit on the next generation. And Malachi captures the moment. Like, you have to think about, Malachi lived some 200 years later. He captures the moment, like he sees the cave transformation, and he goes, that's what's coming on the next generation.
Awesome.
Come on.
Yeah.
And then John the Baptist, as we know, personifies that in that he makes the crooked places straight, the rough places smooth. And John does the same thing Elijah does. He shifts a generation in 3.5 years. John shifts the generation.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, did you notice that Elijah lives on both sides of the cross? He lives in the old covenant. He lives in the new covenant. Did you notice that Jezebel also made it on the other side? She's in the book of Revelation. And the Lord says to the church, I think of Ephesus, you have tolerated the Jezebel. You have tolerated Jezebel. She has polluted my people with immorality, and I'm going to destroy her in her own intimacy. I'm going to kill her in her bed.
Come on.
Yep.
And so we have this. Listen, this thing we're fighting is not just a cultural, kind of event. This is a demonic battle with the spirit of Jezebel, who is calling the fathers and sons into immorality and perverting a generation with immorality. Jezebel is alive and demonically well, and we're not just in a battle to shift culture. We are in a war against a spirit that is trying to seduce our men into immorality and impurity.
Absolutely. And it's also seducing our men into isolation and a paralysis. Like I am alone. I am powerless. I got nothing. Talk a little bit about how a masculine man is a spiritual warrior.
Yeah. Well, there's this phrase called toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Listen, this could be a whole nother conversation we'd have for an hour.
Yeah.
Because this is strategic. This is strategic because if you think about what the Jezebel spirit is doing, it wants men and women to be interchangeable.
Yeah.
It wants them to be interchangeable. And let's just be clear, women are equally powerful, but they are distinctly different.
Totally.
But the whole LGBTQ movement wants to be normal to have two mommies or two daddies. So they're interchangeable. Therefore, you have to masculinize women and you have to feminize men.
Yeah.
And now you intimidate them with this phrase, toxic masculinity, which means every time that I behave in a strong patriarchal way in which I become the protector, the provider, and the promoter of my family, I am tagged with toxic masculinity. And what happens is I am intimidated into being a feminine, into taking on the woman's role in my family, because there's a spirit out there that doesn't want me to bring my strength to the table. Because when my home is under attack, there is a noble there is a noble, godly warrior that sends a message to every hostile. There is a strong warrior here, and you will pay for attacking my family.
Absolutely.
And that's called toxic masculinity to the world, and that's called the role of men in God's kingdom.
Absolutely.
Come on.
Absolutely.
So good.
Yeah. We got a minute left, Kris. Tell us just a little bit about Brave Co. that you could put it, put the important stuff on top.
Yeah, bravecode.com. Need to go there. If you're a man, if you're a son, if you're, we got stuff there for young men too, growing up men. We have lots of events. You'd love to come to an event, but there's a discipleship program. We're discipling literally right now, hundreds of men.
Yeah.
I hear it all the time. I know you guys hear it too. Can't find a father. Well, here's a great place to start.
Yeah.
Great place to start. Get on bravecode.com, jump on there. There's a ton of free stuff to do. There's all kinds of courses. I know you guys have courses too. Just all over, like literally all over America. These, can I say, band of brothers are rising up. There's different kind of titles, but it's all the same spirit. It's that Elijah spirit, breaking that Jezebel spirit, teaching men how to be men, giving young boys and young men the rite of passage, teaching men how to be men, and training a generation to just to beat this demonic spirit and to restore the family and the home. And I'll say this, that the next 20 years is going to be the most exciting years I think, at least in my history, as we see men return home, as we see fathers love their sons and daughters loving fathers again, and actually mothers getting to be mothers instead of trying to be everything.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the excitement of the days that we live in.
Fantastic.
Come on.
Thank you, Kris, so much, man. You're a father to so many.
Yep.
You're a good friend. But most importantly, you're my brother, and I love you. And thank you so much for jumping on here with us.
Thanks for listening. Never miss an episode of The KYLO Show by subscribing to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or watch us on the Loving on Purpose YouTube channel. Don't forget to submit your questions and testimonies to thekyloshow.com. The KYLO Show is produced by Ali Armerding, co-produced by Ashley Beck and Anna Hill, sound engineered and edited by Taylor Silk, and show promoter Christian Zamora. Don't forget, whole healthy families, gonna save the world.